to our nation.
I wonder how you think about where America is at this moment.
It's on Face the Nation.
Can there be stability if Vladimir Putin remains in power?
Face the Nation with Margaret Brennan on CBS.
Trump, Biden, now former Vice President Mike Pence, tangled in a classified document conundrum.
When Mike Pence found it, the first thing he did was call Vladimir over. He's called Comer on the oversight and say, I want to work. We want to make sure this never happens again.
Let's be clear about just how hypocritical the Republicans are.
78 times that the debt limit has been raised, 49 when Republicans were in charge.
How do you see this playing out in Arizona?
So if she decides to run closer to a Republican, then she'll do that. She may try to run closer to the Democratic Party, but it doesn't seem like it's going to help.
Welcome to Red and Blue. I'm Robert Costa in Washington. Thanks for joining us. Questions are now emerging from both Democrats and Republicans after documents marked classified were discovered at the Indiana home of former Vice President Mike Pence. According to his lawyer, a, quote, small amount of material was found at Pence's home and then turned over to the FBI. His attorney told federal officials the former vice president was unaware of the documents at his house. For more on this and the rest of the day's news in Washington, CBS News congressional correspondent Scott McFarland joins us from Capitol Hill. Scott, thanks for being here. Just a few minutes ago, the director of national intelligence, Avril Haines, spoke with several U.S. senators about this documents issue, whether it's with former Vice President Mike Pence, President Biden, or former President Donald Trump. What are they learning from the DNI?
They're saying unequivocally they're not learning enough or not learning much. This was a closed-door briefing, and according to senators, as they walked out of this briefing with the Director of National Intelligence, there was a shield of sorts put over the information, that they were not disclosing key details, citing the open or imminent special counsel investigations ordered by the U.S. Justice Department. So a lot of dissatisfied senators walking out. And as you know, there's no more effective or efficient way to frustrate a member of Congress than to deny them information to which they feel entitled. And there's a sense here among the Republicans walking out of the room that they should get more information about what was found, what might have been exposed, what damage might have been incurred, and that they're not getting the information. We've heard Democrats through the day underscore the significance of the issue, acknowledging this is a pressing issue. But I got to tell you, Bob, ever since the revelation about the documents in Indiana at the home of the former vice president, a lot of the criticism has been more muted or disoriented, as if both parties now have so much skin in the game, each, that they're not sure how to weaponize this information politically.
Turning to the debt limit, Scott, it looks like a showdown is certainly possible over federal spending, but many Republicans are beginning to rule out fighting for changes to Social Security or Medicare or Medicaid. So what do they want to put on the table as these talks develop?
That's really stood out over the last 24 hours, how Republicans are messaging that they will not insist upon cuts to Social Security or Medicare as they seek spending cuts before agreeing to raise the debt ceiling. So they're trying to message on that. But they're also being unambiguous. They want cuts required before they give their votes. Now, everybody in the Senate, both parties, has directed attention to the House Republicans, saying it's their show, they've got to move first. Republicans and Democrats in the Senate both agree it's the House Republicans' move. We spoke with one of the House Republicans who earlier this month held out his vote for Kevin McCarthy to be Speaker. I asked him if he'd hold out his vote on a debt ceiling increase, too. Here's what he had to say about himself and his colleagues. You think there are 5 or 6 other House Republicans who would say absolutely no clean debt ceiling increase like yourself?
Oh, there are probably many more than that. That's why we're not going to have a clean debt ceiling coming out of the House of Representatives.
It would need something else with it.
Absolutely. And again, the responsible thing is to say, look, if we're going to increase the credit card limit, we've got to put controls on the spending.
Republican Andy Harris of Maryland, member of the House Freedom Caucus. One thing I'll note, Dr. Harris did mention the possibility that money could be saved or cut from some of the COVID programs that may have money remaining or may have infused themselves into other programs like the food stamp program, the SNAP program. he's putting a possible cut out in the air. A lot of other Republicans have yet to do that. And senators have said, once Republicans put something on the floor and vote on it and show they can get votes, then there's room for negotiation and meetings, or at least discussions about meetings and negotiations.
Speaking of senators, Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont, favorite of many progressives, is meeting with President Biden today as he prepares to chair the Senate Health Committee. This is a signal that the left is standing with President Biden as he faces some criticism over his handling of these documents and other issues. And it's been notable in recent days that it is the centrist Democrats, like Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia, and not the progressives, like Senator Bernie Sanders and others, who have been tough on this White House. What do you make of that?
I think it's noteworthy. It underscores something, that there is a Democratic Party that's trying to demonstrate it functions, that it's organized and gets things done, and that can work in lockstep on things. Senator Sanders meeting with the president, I think, personifies that effort. What Democrats have been doing over the past 48 hours is opening their news conferences, opening their remarks to reporters by saying, we're unified. We're functioning, drawing a contrast with what we've seen out of House Republicans out of the gates this Congress. A halted speaker election and committees not yet formally organized. That's, I think, a personification of it, having Senator Sanders meet with the president.
And, Scott, it's also perhaps a sign that the left of the Democratic Party wants to be with the president as he negotiates this debt limit agreement. Left-leaning Democrats do not want to see any cuts on the table. And for the president to meet with Sanders, it shows that he's not leaning toward any kind of deal at this point. The Democratic line still seems to be a clean debt limit extension, period. No?
Yeah, and what's more, at this moment, because of that, it still seems like these two sides are talking past each other. They're not having the same conversation or the same argument. Democrats are trying to be emphatic that there's no negotiating over the debt ceiling. It's too dangerous to do so. Republicans, like Andy Harris of Maryland, saying we need this and this and this potentially before we vote to raise the debt ceiling. So this is a different conversation the two sides are having. Until they get on the same plane, this is likely not to progress, and we get closer and closer to the D-date of late spring.
And final thought here, Scott. Does this end ultimately with House Republicans, a few of them at least, breaking with Speaker McCarthy and going with the Democrats on a clean hike?
Feels very much like we're on a trajectory towards some Democrats voting for something to get it past the House involving the debt ceiling. Andy Harris says there's not 5 or 6 votes in his conference to do this clean, and it has to be clean. Well, that's going to require some unique combination of Democrats and Republicans, a political complexion of which we've yet to see.
It's going to be intriguing. Where do Republicans in the House find leverage as this all unfolds? Scott McFarland, thank you for your reporting. Democrats and Republicans are at odds over how to deal with the debt ceiling. Ahead, we will talk to a Democrat about what they might be willing to negotiate. You're streaming Red and Blue, reporting across the political divide.
Original documentary from CBS reports tensions rising between a powerful country and a vital island.
The supply of this technology came grinding to a halt. The world would grind to a halt.
Absolutely. As Taiwan faces threats and aggression,
Taiwan is on the front line, and we understand our responsibility as a democracy. We cannot fall.
CBS News examines whether they can defend themselves.
Putin, Ukraine, China, Taiwan, they are manifestations of the battle between autocracy and democracy. And that is a fight that we're all engaged in.
Defending Taiwan, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
When weather turns extreme,
states from the plains to the northeast are bracing for more than 2 feet of heavy snow.
Every second counts.
This is a monster winter storm.
CBS News and the Weather Channel bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
There's a wrinkle in the forecast, the accumulating ice.
Oh! You'll have time to get prepared.
Take precautions before you head out.
Feel the forecast on the CBS Evening News with Nora O'Donnell.
Stories that inform.
You can be really old at 60, and you can be really young at 85.
Inspire.
How do we unlock the power within ourselves to be who we want to be?
And brighten your day.
The best part of fame is making people feel good. Always send the people home happy.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
An original documentary from CBS reports.
The carnage in our nation's schools has become painfully repetitive.
Not one more child!
School shootings have parents fighting mad.
I promised my daughter I was going to fight. It's going to keep on happening.
And teachers taking lessons in how to fight back.
This is an exercise.
We approach it as it's you or them.
It shouldn't have to be your teacher's job to protect your life.
But will the battle over gun control,
People are afraid that they're going to lose their gun rights altogether,
be the hardest lesson of all?
The exercise, you're having to shoot at an adult. Are you prepared to have to kill one of your students?
Guns in the Classroom, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Welcome back to Red and Blue. I'm Robert Costa. New York Republican George Santos facing new questions about his campaign financing and spending. He reportedly made a major revision to his 2022 campaign filings Tuesday. Santos now says that a $500,000 campaign loan did not come from his personal funds. He does face multiple investigations after reports surfaced that he fabricated much of his resume during his congressional campaign. CBS News political correspondent Caitlin Huey-Burns has been following this story closely and joins us now. Caitlin, what's the latest?
Hey, Bob, good to see you. Well, the latest is this campaign finance filing. And you mentioned that he essentially said in this filing that he wasn't the source of this money to his campaign. So now that actually raises more questions than answers. The biggest question being, well, what is the source of those funds? And if it didn't come from you, who did it come from? So those questions are still out there ready to be answered. Now, Santos told reporters earlier today that he has no knowledge of these filings, that someone else from the campaign makes these kinds of filings. He had no idea what we were talking about. We've spent a lot of time on the ground in Santos's district trying to talk to everybody that knew him, that can give us a little more information. One person we have been trying to find information from and get a hold of is his campaign treasurer. Her name is Nancy Marks, and she is someone that signed off on all of these finance reports. Her name is on the FEC filings. We went to Long Island to try to reach her. She is on the board of a local library there. We went to that board meeting hoping she would be there. She wasn't. But other members of the community actually stood up and raised these similar questions about her. So she's someone to kind of keep an eye on here. But this is another example of nearly every day there's something new kind of coming out about this embattled congressman.
And Caitlin, you're covering the debt ceiling as well. Earlier today, you spoke with Democratic Pennsylvania Congressman Brendan Boyle about that issue. Let's listen to some of that conversation.
You had introduced legislation, I believe, last Congress to eliminate the debt ceiling altogether. Are you revisiting that? Is that a possibility that could get traction?
Yeah, so just let me clarify.
Yeah.
What I want to do is I'm the author of the Debt Ceiling Reform Act. Mm-hmm. There's a Senate companion bill that the number 2 Democrat in the Senate, Dick Durbin, also has. And that would essentially end the dysfunction over the debt ceiling. The debt ceiling would still exist, but it would enable the executive branch, most likely the Treasury Secretary, to be able to raise it. Congress would still have a voice in the process. Congress would be able to disapprove that if it so wished by a vote in the House as well as the Senate. But what I want to do is really get this out of the political food fight, because a failure to raise the debt ceiling has never happened in American history. It would be catastrophic, both to the national economy as well as the worldwide economy. That is a ticking time bomb that we need to defuse. So we need to solve this present debt ceiling problem, but we also need to solve it for the future as well.
Is there any circumstance that you can imagine Democrats being willing to negotiate with Republicans on some of the items that they're requesting cuts to spending in order to raise the debt ceiling?
Yeah. Well, first, let's be clear about just how hypocritical the Republicans are. They voted for all of this increase in spending when Donald Trump was president. They then went along with increasing the debt ceiling every single time it came up in the Trump administration, never talked about deficit and debt, but now suddenly when there's a Democrat in the White House, they have a problem with it. So that's number one, their clear hypocrisy. Number two, the debt ceiling is not about future spending. It's about past spending, much of which the other side has voted for. So it's quite clear that we need to raise the debt ceiling, period, end of story. Now, if you want to have a conversation about future spending, we have to have that anyway. We have to pass the appropriations budget for the next fiscal year. We'll have to do that by September 30th. So that conversation is going to happen either way, but it should be independent of the debt ceiling. I fundamentally disagree with the extreme position of Speaker McCarthy to take the debt ceiling essentially as hostage in order to get what they want, and that is cuts to Social Security and Medicare.
Caitlin, what's notable about Congressman Boyle as a reporter, at least on my end, is that he's ranking on budget. He's also very close to President Biden, one of his earliest supporters of his 2020 presidential campaign. He hinted in your interview that there could be some kind of negotiation on spending separate from the debt ceiling. And I wonder, what does your reporting tell you about could the Democrats offer Republicans some spending discussions separate from the debt ceiling as the ceiling continues to approach?
Yeah, it's a good point, Bob. And actually, before the interview, the congressman and I were talking about last time we saw each other was in Iowa while he was campaigning for President Biden, now President Biden. What's interesting there is, of course, there is no appetite among Democrats for any negotiation about the debt ceiling, about raising it. McCarthy could pass a debt ceiling increase with Democratic votes. But remember, he is going to need his Republican coalition who doesn't want him to cut these deals with Democrats. That's why they were opposing his speakership in the first place, some of them. But what's interesting here is that there is an appetite that you do hear from some Democrats about, yes, of course, we need to get some spending under control. Of course, we need to talk about this. But, not in relation to the debt ceiling. They are two different items here. And the debt ceiling is related to money already spent, while these cuts would be to future spending. So they don't see how they should be connected, especially when the economy is at stake. But that's something to kind of focus on over the next couple of weeks and months until April is what are these conversations like? What are Democrats able to do? And Boyle is the ranking member on budget. And he told me that there is concern about working with Republicans given how difficult it was for them to coalesce around a leader. It's a fractured party at this point that can be difficult.
If you couple what Congressman Boyle told you with what Senator Manchin said on Sunday, saying it would be a mistake for Democrats not to negotiate on spending, it's something to watch in the coming weeks. Could Senator Manchin and others in the Senate Republican Conference come to the table with some kind of spending agreement that could save the debt limit situation from becoming one of brinkmanship?
Well, it's certainly something to watch. And if you think about someone like Joe Manchin, he's up for re-election in this next coming term. And there is going to be some incentive for some of these Democrats who are in these tough districts and states to be able to say, look, we have made these cuts. But you're also hearing a lot from Democrats about, and the congressman alluded to this, about the ways in which Republicans had no trouble raising the debt ceiling while Republicans were in control of Congress and the White House. And so there's a lot of this kind of going around, but look for those members who may be in endangered going into their own reelection bids and wanting to at least show some kind of progress in terms of perhaps working for the other side politically. For someone like Manchin, that would make a lot of sense considering where he's from.
That's so true. 2024 is a factor, not just the presidential race, but how these Senate races are starting to develop. Caitlin Huey-Burns, thank you.
Thank you.
And Meta announced this afternoon it will restore former President Trump's accounts on both Facebook and Instagram in the coming weeks. Trump was originally banned from the social media platforms In January of 2021, just after the January 6th Capitol attack, the company says it will, quote, put new guardrails in place to deter repeat offenses. Twitter restored Trump's account in November following its takeover by the billionaire Elon Musk, but he has yet to use that platform again. And speaking of 2024 Senate races, one of the big races to watch will be a matchup likely between a newly independent incumbent and a sitting Democratic congressman. Arizona candidate and Democrat Ruben Gallego makes his case for that Senate seat and gives us an update on the campaign. That's up next. You're streaming Red and Blue.
An original CBS Reports documentary.
Yoga and wellness has become a place of anti-science.
Online clickbait.
The algorithms feed you content based upon your own fantasy.
Potentially at my peril.
There's no question about it.
Spreading digital disinformation.
Their entire yoga studio and spiritual community got so embedded in all of the QAnon stuff that it became this sick place.
Why pro-health people are fertile ground for anti-science messages.
We can just go into the whole mask thing. A lot of us just believe that's symbolism for silencing people.
People are locked in this mindset. They've been taught to accept what the medical doctors say.
No longer are you going to be willing to take any medical advice.
It's a big problem that we urgently need to address.
An original CBS Reports documentary streaming now. An original CBS Reports documentary.
We need to put an end to this territorial status.
Will statehood create a better Puerto Rico?
So that we have the same quality of life that you see in the States.
What do you worry about?
Me living here in the future?
They're giving incentives to non-Puerto Ricans to come to Puerto Rico
and extract our natural resources and take over our land.
Vacation in Puerto Rico, and in exchange for that, you don't pay taxes.
Why would I allow somebody who abused me for 123 years to then consume me?
An original CBS Reports documentary streaming now. People from every corner of America facing challenges.
Everyone is just looking for some type of connection.
Just raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to help.
Coming together to find solutions.
We are going to do something about it.
Their stories are our stories.
Welcome to Eye on America.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
After decades in the public eye and public service, this mother-daughter duo is now talking about gutsy women. What's the gutsiest thing you've ever done? We go person to person with Secretary Hillary Rodham Clinton and Chelsea Clinton.
Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform, inspire, and brighten your day.
The best part of fame is making people feel good.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
Welcome back to Red and Blue. I'm Robert Costa. More than 30 U.S. Senate seats are up in 2024 as Democrats look to defend their majority. The map could favor Republicans in the eyes of some strategists, and one of the closest states could be Arizona, where incumbent Senator Kyrsten Sinema is expected to defend her seat after recently leaving the Democratic Party to become an independent. And this week, Congressman Ruben Gallego entered the race to run for Senate. Arizona Democratic Congressman Ruben Gallego joins us now. Congressman, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having us.
You are now running for U.S. Senate in Arizona for the Democratic nomination. Do you believe Senator Kyrsten Sinema, who's now an independent, will actually run for this seat?
You know, I don't know. We can't anticipate that she is or she isn't, so we're going to run our race. We're going to continue to do the strong campaign that we've already started. We were able to raise more than $1 million yesterday from 27,000 individuals. We're about to do a great kickoff, hitting about 5 different stops over 2 days in Arizona, and we're going to continue moving and getting that momentum to make sure we win in 2024.
I know you can't predict if she runs or not, but I'm trying to understand how you see this. Do you believe ultimately she's trying to run here as a Republican, as an independent? How do you see this playing out in Arizona?
Look, Kirsten, number one, only cares about Kirsten. So what she's going to do is going to end up being decided by what's best for her. And so if she decides to run closer to a Republican, then she'll do that. She may try to run closer to the Democratic Party, but it doesn't seem like it's going to help. Overall, what we're seeing from polling and just from anecdotal instances is that she's lost everybody. It's impossible for her to win this race. And maybe at some point she finally realizes that and steps out of the race. But there is no way that Kyrsten Sinema is going to win this race at all.
Arizona Democrats, are they lining up behind you, or are they waiting to see what the senator does?
No, we're very happy to have a lot of support of the Arizona Democratic Party, a lot of the ground support, a lot of politicians, elected officials, labor leaders, tribal leaders. We're going to have a lot of great support. And even though I am going up against an incumbent, a lot of them that they've known forever, they understand that this is a very important race, and it's time for us to consolidate and make sure that we keep the seat.
I read something very interesting a few days ago that Senator John Thune, who's close to Senator Kyrsten Sinema, has said he has suggested to her that she begins to caucus with Republicans in the Senate. One, do you believe that could happen? And two, if she did do that, what would your response be?
I don't think it would happen. I think, Senator Sinema still at least has some inklings of Democratic leanings. She is pro-choice, though she won't help codify Roe v. Wade. She's pro-LGBT, though she, watered down, the Respect the Marriage Act. But I don't think she could go all the way. Should she go all the way, then we would basically continue running our race, and then we would absolutely destroy her in the general.
You believe you would absolutely destroy her in the general election?
Absolutely. If she decided to caucus with Republicans, it would be quite horrific for her in terms of the general election.
She has about $8 million on hand, last I checked. You just said you raised $1 million since you jumped into this race. How are you going to close the gap? Not easy with a lot of business support for Senator Sinema.
Well, we raised $1 million in one day. She raised $8 million over 6 years. So, the math is kind of on my side on that one. But number two, look, I'm a hard worker. I'm going to hit those phones. I'm going to go door to door. I'm going to do the fundraising that I have to do. This is going to be a very expensive race. We're going to have to raise close to probably $60 million, just like how Mark Kelly did. But guess what? She also has to raise that money, and it's not going to be as easy as she thinks because there is no small dollar funders for her. She's not going to be able to get the $5 or $6 donations that are really important because at some point you will eventually tap out of very rich donors.
How much do you have on hand right now?
I cannot tell you off the top of my head because it's increasing all the time, but we're probably inching towards $3 million already.
$3 million. So you're about $5 million away from her, and so you're climbing fast if you just did $1 million in a day.
Yep.
What about your race? Are you running as an outsider? You just called the Senate an insiders club a few days ago. Are you running as an outsider campaign? Is that how you see this race?
Look, I'm running as an Arizonan. I'm running as someone that cares about, the people of Arizona and the people that really have been left behind, the people that, feel like nobody's fighting for them. And I think at the end of the day, that could be considered an outsider, whatever it is. But I think that's the thing that people will want to be attracted to. That's what people want to vote for. I don't think they want the chumminess that happens between, the lobbyist class, the Wall Street class, and our senators. That's not, what you're supposed to do is in representative government. And at the end of the day, I think that is going to sell more with voters than anything else.
One of the outsiders in Washington is Senator Bernie Sanders, and he's a favorite of progressives, many progressives like you in Arizona. He was asked the other day about your campaign, and he said, well, I haven't been asked for an endorsement yet from Congressman Gallego. So would you like to have Senator Bernie Sanders' endorsement in your Senate race? Yes or no?
But right now, we're focusing on Arizona endorsements, and at some point, we will be going around getting every type of endorsement we can from every senator that we can. We're not going to be afraid of anybody, whether they are, party from the left or to the right, as long as they align with our values, and as long as they understand what I believe. And maybe we don't align 100%, but in the end, as long as they understand I'm here for Arizona, then yes, we'll work with them.
Democratic Arizona Congressman and Senate candidate Ruben Gallego, we appreciate your time. And that does it for us today. You can stream Red and Blue Monday to Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern And a reminder, if you want to watch previous episodes of this show, you can see them anytime on the CBS News website. Just go to cbsnews.com/red-and-blue.
Everybody wakes up in the morning and they are pelted with alerts that frighten them, news that agitates them. With this show, we have the time to explain what's going on. These migrants, they've been released. Explain the status that allows them to be released, to slow things down a little bit. What are the big sets of questions for China and its ambitions? Hackers are stepping up their attacks.